Hi everybody, today we're joined by Mr. Jack Weetman, friend of the Armory, and also the man behind LighterLuxe. Jack is an expert in vintage lighters, and unfortunately you are leaving Hong Kong, aren't you?
I am, yes. I'm going a couple of weeks till I'm off.
And after Jack is off, he will be bequeathing part of his Dunhill lighter collection to the shop. And we're going to help him try and find a new home for these lighters. So if you have a chance, please stop by and come and check them out because they're really beautiful, beautiful objects. I invited Jack in today because I would love for Jack to give us a little introduction into the world of vintage Dunhill lighters. Jack, please.
Yes,
educate
absolutely.
us.
So Dunhill is really special. It's really important because they were the first lighter to basically be able to work with one hand. And so people don't ever think about this. So for example, this would have been what people had when they had original lighters. This is called a rope lighter. So during the First World War, everyone would have had these. And how it worked, you had to pull this through, as I said, with effectively two hands, and then you would light the rope like this.
Wow.
You see, and then that would be your flame. Now the rope would have the fluid, the lighter fluid in it, and then that's basically how you would have to do it. And the reason they said this is two-handed. You could probably sit and figure it out with one hand, but this was basically considered a two-handed lighter. You needed to be able to pull it through and sort of shut it off. So yeah, so that was what everybody basically would have had.
And so the
before.
rope was the refillable part.
The rope, you fueled the rope, yeah. And the problems with these were that the fuel would evaporate quite quickly, so you'd have to basically have fuel with you all the time.
How quickly is quite quickly? Like a day?
Like probably a day,
Oh.
like, unless you absolutely saturate it. But then if you're saturating it, you're very likely to end up setting yourself on fire because your pocket's now saturated with fuel. So these were, they did the job and they were great, but they weren't the best case scenario for lighters basically.
It's cool. There's like a guilloche pattern on the barrel and even a little spot, I guess, for engraving.
For engraving, yeah. So because everyone would put their name on it basically, so
And
they
people
knew.
were using this to light pipes?
I mean,
cigarettes?
it would have been used for everything and anything basically. So at the time, obviously, they would for particularly if you were on the front lines of war and such, and you would be using it where you can, obviously, where matches might not be.
You can smell it actually. Just
Which is another problem, which is an issue. So.
And how old is this, did you say?
They were around sort of from probably the 1880s through to the First World War kind of time. People were using these predominantly rope lighters. And during the war, sometimes you'd see people would have a meter of the rope and it would be wrapped up. So they'd be carrying around so that it would be usable for a long period of time.
What is what is it made of? Silver?
Oh, that would be silver, yeah, silver plate.
Amazing.
So probably brass with a silver plate on it. So,
fabulous. Yeah. Amazing. Okay, show us the next one.
But then you see But the history of lighters goes back. So this is the Dunhill flintlock. And what people don't realize is the first ever lighters were old flintlock pistols that had broken. So what they would do is that if you were using them and your barrel would break, from over time the barrels would give out, and they had all these kind of the front ends basically, or the back end, sorry, of the lighter, and they didn't know what to do with them, so they adapted them and they put a tinder box on, which we now have as a fuel box, and then literally it would work in the same way that you would pull it and it would fire exactly as the flintlock pistol would. The flint would hit the steel and it would light the tinder box, and then you would have a lighter, and that's what they were using. Like this 1700s, they figured that out. I'm still restoring him. He's not ready to go yet. So
it's been decommissioned.
Yeah, he's currently still decommissioned. So, but see, this is, and then Dunhill released this after the Second World War. About the end of 1940s, 1950s, they bought these out, some flintlock pistol sort of examples, just of what they would have had before.
It's upcycling 150 years
exactly,
ago. Yeah.
Exactly.
There you go.
And then this is cool. So this is a 1935 silent flame lighter. And this actually had batteries in it, which is quite crazy for 1935. And they would go in, and this is Dunhill, but this was when it was Parker of London, which was what Dunhill basically was beforehand. And this is what would light. You see, so the fuel would go inside here, and then you would just touch it on here. Maybe we'll do some close-ups later, to show. And then a little element would light, and then that would basically light the wick. Now the problem I found is I think that the fuel doesn't light as easily as old fuel used to, so it's quite difficult to actually get it. I don't know if we'd be able to get it to go just from sort of cheating. But yeah, he said you would basically end up with a, no, you see it doesn't even want to light now. You would end up with basically a little flame on here. You would light your pipe, your lighter, your cigarette, and then you would put that back in there.
It's a charming thing to have at home.
The cool thing is that this is this little model on the top is actually modeled off of a famous burlesque dancer named Sally Rand. And she was pretty much the pin-up of the time. So she was around from sort of 1928. She was the #1 burlesque dancer at the time, so they used her as the inspiration for the model on the top.
Amazing.
But when you consider that that's 4 years before the Second World War, and they had that kind of thing going, which is quite amazing, really.
Was something like this expensive?
I think, yeah, they would be at the time. So I know that I would say yes for the everyday person. Yes, they would have been. It probably would have been about the equivalent of, say, spending a couple of thousand Hong Kong dollars now on something. So back then that was a lot of money.
$200 US for the Americans.
So that was quite a lot. But then, as I said, so they moved on from this, and they decided they wanted to have a one-handed lighter. And now this is a modern example of a table lighter of what's called the modern unique. But basically there was a vintage original version that came out in about 1928, if I remember correctly. And they used this patent, this lift arm patent here, which would basically which Dunhill kind of ended up buying out, and it was very unique to their lighters. This is the modern version of it, basically, but this is kind of how they were a bit wider, but how they looked. And they were called the Dunhill Unique, and the Unique was the first lighter, 1928. Put it in your pocket, carry it around, have it, light it with one hand. And
this was made in
loved
England
it.
too.
Yeah. So they were made, London at this time. So there was different places they were making them. They were some of the Parker stuff they were making actually in America at one point as well.
Was it related to the pen company?
I think there's a connection down the line. There was a connection, and they kind of separated off, as far as I'm aware.
The branding is so beautiful. It's just like this tiny little plaque right here.
Yeah. So this is called the Modern Unique. So they changed it to be a butane gas style. And then that's a table lighter version, which are really nice.
Awesome.
And then 1939, they came out with this. So this was the Roller Light, and this is basically the original, the big brother to what was now the Roller Gas. And these were petrol lighters as such, the same. So they have a wick. And the reason these were really sought after, really cool, was because they didn't evaporate as quickly as a lot of the petrol lighters did. So people liked these because they would hold the petrol in them, for the lighter fluid in them, for a lot longer, because they kind of have a better little system on the top. Now the issues with these, you can't control the flame height as well, unless you have the wick kind of sticking out further. But they were absolutely lovely. They came out, said 1939. They ran through till 1956. And they came in chrome or gold plate or silver, and then you could also get a solid silver version of it as well. So they were really sort of sought after. Even at the time, I think it was $12 US in 1939 for the plated versions of these, which I don't know what that would work out as now, but it's quite expensive, back then. And then I said 1956 that came around, and butane lighters were just becoming a thing, and Dunhill jumped on with that, and they basically made these. These are the Roller Gas versions. They come in different styles. You've got gold plated, you've got silver plated, you've got palladium plates, and then they made them right the way through from 56 till pretty much the end of the 1990s, and they still make them, but they changed how they make them.
I see.
So, and some people within the lighter community aren't as fond of the newer ones as the vintage ones. So,
yeah. These are fabulous.
So, yeah.
Can you point out some of the little cues for dating these things?
Absolutely.
Because, for instance, like you mentioned things like the little D on there.
So with ones, there's actually, you can, if you look inside some of them, they will have a date code in the flame area. So this one doesn't have it, sadly. But I can tell from looking at this that this is a 1970s. It will be after 1973 because it doesn't have the hinge showing. So on the older styles, you could see the hinge on the back, and then from 1972, 73, they hid the hinge on them basically. So that's no longer, so even though it's there, they did a really good job of machining it so you can't see it. And in the 1970s, they don't have the little D logo, the Dunhill logo. From about the early 80s, mid 80s, they then started putting the little D logo on the front corner, which you see there, which, so that tells you it's a 1980s, but that also went through to the early 1990s. And then from the sort of mid 1990s to late 1990s, possibly just into the 2000s, they moved to a kind of a little bit heavier palladium style. Which is this style, and in a lot of those they don't have the D anymore because they kind of went for patterns that would kind of
like
utilize all
so
the
well.
space.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And what do you have to do to restore these? Because you go through a lot, so it'd be good to hear that on camera.
So to restore, I strip them entirely down to all their individual parts. There's about 39 parts involved inside each one of these. I strip them down. Every single part gets cleaned thoroughly. There's a lot of grime that builds up in these, and the problem is some people sell them, they sell them restored, but actually there's sort of tricks that people can do to make it so they'll work maybe for a couple of months. They'll use special grease and things, and they'll kind of make it so that it will work, but after a couple of months they'll stop working. So I strip them completely down, clean every part, run them through the sonic cleaners, then I re-oil every single moving section, put new rubber O-rings in them, clean out all the valve, rebuild it, basically polish it, and then they're ready to go. So it takes me about 4 hours, I think, from start to finish. So.
And parts-wise, you have to cannibalize old ones, or you have like repair kits?
There are some places you can buy kind of new made versions, but I prefer buying old stock. So I'll buy one that's got a problem with it that can't be fixed, and then I'll take all the parts that you can off of them. So
that's good to know.
I have a graveyard of
Dunhills,
basically. But yeah, so I mean, I just love them, and I particularly like Dunhill just because they are made so beautifully. They really are, like the amount of passion that went into making these and care, even to a point that there's some little bits inside. There's like a catch that holds this roller in place, and that you'd think that's tiny, and you think, oh, they'll all fit, but they don't. Some of them have been sized to fit each individual lighter. So it's quite, the thought that's gone into it is amazing. So, and I just fell in love with them. So although I love, a lot of the other lighter brands, and I have got others, the Dunhills just hold a special place in my heart, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As a watch person, like these remind me so much of like a fine mechanical watch. That cap is so beautifully engineered, and the fit and finish is so, I don't know, it's awesome. Yeah. It's really a lovely piece of industrial craftsmanship. Very cool.
Well, yeah, it's very nice to be here and to show these off. So, and it's nice to know that I think they fit very well with with this sort of style of shop.
Thanks, Jack. Well, thanks for giving us the chance to have these at the shop and to sell them on your behalf.
You.
And hopefully, if you have a little time, we can talk a little bit about lighter maintenance for the next video, right?
Absolutely, we're going to look at that next.
All right, great. Check out Jack. His IG handle is LighterLuxe.
LighterLuxe, yeah. So
and eventually, when you're, what are you calling it? Not a resort, right? Like
it's going to be a country house, Scottish country house, hotel basically. So
fabulous.
This is where we're going. So
well, when you have that ready, we'd love to come visit you on the
Absolutely, we'll do another video.
That's it for now. Thanks for watching.